For years she hid the Count's illegitimate heir, until he found out and demanded his son back. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The morning began like any other in the quiet village of Bellano. The lake lay still, its surface trembling only when a breeze passed through the reeds. Isabella Moretti opened the shutters of her small cottage and let the soft light touch the table where her son's schoolbooks waited. "Matteo, finish your bread before it hardens," she said. The boy ran across the room with his shirt half buttoned. "But I'm not hungry, Mama." "You will be once you start reading with Father Giulio," she replied, placing a hand on his head. "He says a hungry mind cannot live in a hungry body." He grinned, biting into the bread only to please her. His hair shone chestnut brown in the light, the same tone as hers. Only his eyes, a clear grey blue, did not belong to her. Whenever she looked at them, she felt a small tremor of fear and tenderness. Outside, the sound of church bells floated across the water. Isabella's neighbor, old Signora Bianchi, called from the gate, "Isabella, there's a messenger in the square. He says a noble carriage has arrived from Milan. The whole village is buzzing." Isabella smiled faintly. "A carriage? Here? Perhaps someone visiting the abbey?" "Not a pilgrim's carriage, dear. It bears a crest. A black raven, or so they say." The bread slipped from Isabella's hand. Her voice faltered. "A raven? Yes, yes. You know, the one from the Ravanelli family. Do you remember them? The Count's estate on the other side of the lake." "I remember." Isabella turned her face away quickly, hiding the color that rose to her cheeks. Signora Bianchi went on cheerfully, unaware. "They say the Count has returned. A widower now, imagine, after so many years abroad." Isabella forced a smile. "How interesting." When the woman left, Isabella leaned against the doorframe, breathing fast. She had not heard that name spoken aloud in 8 years. Lorenzo di Ravanelli, the man who had once promised her eternity under the olive trees behind his family's villa. The man who had left when duty called him to marry wealth. The man who never knew that his blood ran through the veins of the boy finishing his bread by the window. She turned to Matteo. He was humming, unaware of the storm that had entered her chest. "Go, my darling. Father Giulio is waiting." He kissed her cheek. "You'll come later?" "Yes, always." When he had gone, she closed the door and rested her hands on the table. The faint smell of bread, the sound of waves, the ticking of the small clock, everything seemed to hold its breath. At noon, Father Giulio appeared at her gate. His robe was damp with lake mist. He rarely left the rectory without cause. "Father, is something wrong?" she asked. He looked uneasy. "I've come to speak with you privately." "Of course." She led him inside. He remained standing, turning his hat in his hands. "You have heard the news. The Count di Ravanelli has returned to the region." "Yes." "Isabella, I must tell you something before others do. The Count visited me this morning. He made inquiries about a child living under your roof." Her breath caught. "A child?" He heard from a servant in Como that a boy of 7 with light eyes resides with a widow named Moretti. The description? It was enough to rouse suspicion. She stepped back. "Who told him?" "I cannot say, but he seemed determined. He asked if the child was yours by blood." "And what did you answer?" "I told him the truth, that the boy is known here as Matteo Moretti, your late husband's son." But the Count's eyes were sharp. "He said he would see for himself." Isabella gripped the back of a chair. "He will come here." "Yes." She turned away, hiding her trembling hands. "Thank you, Father." "Isabella, if there is something you wish to confess—" "There is nothing I can confess without harming the innocent," she interrupted softly. "You baptized my child, Father. You have seen how he grows, how he prays. That is all that matters." The priest's face softened. "I know your heart is pure, but secrets, even born of love, have a way of rising." She looked at him with quiet pain. "They rise only when the world wants to destroy them." That night, after Matteo had gone to bed, Isabella sat near the small window overlooking the lake. She held in her palm a silver cross, simple, worn, engraved with the initials L.R. Lorenzo di Ravanelli, the only proof that once, in a moment of foolish youth, she had believed in forever. The candlelight trembled. She remembered the day he left. He had stood beneath the stone archway of the villa, his jaw tight, his words colder than the wind off the mountains. My father forbids it. You know why. I know he forbids me, not you, she had answered. But love cannot feed on scandal. You will be provided for. I ask for nothing but you. But he had turned away, leaving her with the cross and a heart too full of tears to speak. Now she pressed the same cross to her lips. If you ever loved me, she whispered to the night, do not take him from me. Morning came with an unusual silence. Even the birds seemed to wait. Matteo was still asleep when a carriage rumbled through the square again. Isabella drew the curtain just enough to see the glint of black lacquer, the crest of a raven upon the door. Two men in fine coats stood by the carriage, speaking to villagers. Children pointed, curious. Signora Bianchi's voice rang from the street. He's looking for someone, I tell you. Perhaps a lost relation. Isabella shut the curtain and leaned against the wall. Her pulse quickened. She could not run. Running would be confession. She must remain calm, ordinary, invisible. At midday, Matteo returned from his lesson full of chatter. Mamma, Father Giulio says I read better than any boy in the parish. She smiled, kneeling to fix his collar. I believe it. Can we go to the lake after supper? I want to see the ducks. Perhaps. As she spoke, a shadow crossed the window. The sound of boots on gravel followed. Isabella straightened. Matteo turned, curious. A tall man stood beyond the gate. His coat was dark, his bearing noble. Even from a distance, she knew that stance, that quiet authority. For a moment, time folded in on itself. She whispered, Go to your room, Matteo. But Mamma... Now, my love. He obeyed, sensing something he could not name. Isabella opened the door. The man approached slowly. His face was leaner than she remembered, the lines deeper, the eyes colder. Yet behind the severity lay the memory of the youth who had once kissed her hands beneath the olive trees. Signora Moretti. His voice was smooth but distant. Yes, I am Count Lorenzo di Ravanelli. I know. He looked around the small courtyard, the wooden fence, the pots of herbs. You live modestly. I live peacefully. So it seems. His gaze settled on her. You have a child. Her throat tightened. Every mother in this village has one. He stepped closer. Not every child in this village has eyes like mine. The words cut through the air. She flinched, but did not retreat. What are you implying, my lord? I do not imply. I ask. 8 years ago, you vanished from Como without a word. When I returned from my father's funeral, you were gone. Then I hear whispers of a boy born that same year, raised by a widow. I had to see for myself. Her voice was low. Whispers are cruel things. Sometimes they are truths people fear to speak aloud. She tried to steady her breath. If you have come to humiliate me, you have succeeded. Now go. Not until I know the truth. The truth belongs to God, not to men who abandoned it. He stiffened. Abandoned? You left me. I left because your father ordered it, because your family called me a disgrace. He frowned. I never received a word from you, not a letter. I sent many. None reached you. Lorenzo's expression shifted, but only for a heartbeat. Then why hide the boy? Why raise him in my absence? Because you were married, she said sharply. Because the world would have crushed him before he learned to walk. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then he spoke quietly. I must see him. No. I have that right. You have no right to a child you never knew existed. He took a step forward. He is of my blood and of my heart. Their eyes met, hers burning with fear and love, his with something harder to name. Behind her, Matteo's small voice called from inside, Mama! Who is it? Lorenzo froze. Isabella turned toward the door. Go back inside, Matteo. But the boy had already appeared in the doorway, barefoot, his curls untamed. He looked at the stranger curiously. Good afternoon, sir. Lorenzo stared, all color draining from his face. The resemblance was undeniable. The same eyes, the same shape of mouth. He could not speak. Isabella reached for her son's shoulder. Matteo, greet the Count and go finish your lesson. The Count? The boy repeated, puzzled. Like the ones in Father Giulio's stories. Yes. Now go, my love. When he was gone, Lorenzo turned away, pressing a hand to his mouth. God help me, he murmured. Now you see, Isabella said softly. He knows nothing. Do not take that from him. He faced her again, voice unsteady. Does he believe I am dead? He believes his father died before he was born. And you, do you intend to keep this lie forever? If it keeps him safe. Lorenzo's tone hardened. You had no right. I had every right. You would have buried him in shame. You think me a monster. I think you a man who fears scandal more than truth. He stared at her, breathing heavily. I will not argue here. Tomorrow I shall send word. The boy must come to the estate. You cannot. I can, and I will. He is my heir. He is my son. Lorenzo's voice lowered to a whisper. We shall see what the law says. She stepped back as he turned to leave. Lorenzo, she said softly. He stopped, but did not face her. You loved me once. He hesitated. Once, perhaps. But love without honor is ruin. Then he walked away, leaving the scent of dust and horses in the air. That evening the villagers gathered near the square, speaking in hushed tones. They had seen the Count's carriage stop before the widow's house. Some said he sought charity, others said he sought vengeance. Isabella kept her shutters closed, pretending not to hear. Matteo asked over supper, Why was that man looking at me like that? She answered gently, Because you remind him of someone he once knew. Do you know him? She paused. Long ago. Is he bad? No, my heart. Just lost. When the boy slept, she went to the small chest at the foot of his bed and took out a bundle of letters, faded, unopened, returned by the Ravanelli estate years ago. She touched them one by one, then tied them again with a ribbon. At the sound of hooves outside, she rose quickly. The carriage was gone, but two figures on horseback passed toward the rectory. The Count's messengers, no doubt. Her heart pounded. She crossed herself and whispered, If he takes him, may heaven give me strength. The lake wind pressed against the shutters. Somewhere a dog barked. In the distance the church bell tolled the late hour. She sat by the candle until its flame began to fade. Then, in the stillness, came a sound that froze her where she stood. A slow, deliberate knock at her door. The knock came again, firm, measured, as if no one inside could possibly refuse to open. Isabella held the candle high and stepped to the door. When she lifted the latch, Lorenzo stood there in the night air, his coat damp from mist, his eyes bright with determination. You should not come at this hour, she said quietly. I came because I could not leave it as it was, he answered. You owe me truth. I have told you all that matters. Not enough. Let me in. She hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered, looking around the small room that smelled of wax and herbs. His gaze fell on the child's drawings, pinned to the wall. He touched one, a crude sketch of a house beside water. He drew this? Yes. He has your hand. He has only what life gave him. Lorenzo turned to face her. You think me cruel. Perhaps I am. But I will not be robbed of my son. You cannot steal what was never offered, she said sharply. You gave me silence. I gave him everything else. He stepped closer. If you cared for him, you would give him what he deserves. Education, inheritance, his rightful name. What name would that be? Bastard? Whispered scandal in every hall? His jaw clenched. I am offering him legitimacy. You are offering him shame wrapped in gold. They stood in tense stillness until a sound from the other room broke it. Matteo's small voice drifted out. Mama? Isabella turned. Go back to bed, my darling. Who are you talking to? Lorenzo's eyes softened for the first time. Let me speak to him. No, but Matteo had already stepped into the doorway, rubbing his eyes. You came back. The words startled them both. What did you say? Lorenzo asked. I dreamed of you last night, the boy said sleepily. You were standing by the lake. You looked sad. Isabella's breath trembled. Go to bed, Matteo. But Lorenzo knelt and smiled gently. Do you like the lake? Yes. Mama says it sings when it rains. She is right. He looked up at Isabella, and something unspoken passed between them, a thread of tenderness neither could deny. When Matteo finally returned to bed, Lorenzo rose. He dreams of me, he said softly. Even if he does not know why, please, she whispered, leave us in peace. There can be no peace built on lies. Then leave me my sin. It has harmed no one. You think that, he said. But when he grows, when he asks questions, when others whisper, He will suffer for what you hide. I will bear that pain, not he. I cannot allow it." She turned from him, voice breaking. "Then you will destroy us both." The next morning the village stirred earlier than usual. Lorenzo's carriage stood outside the cottage, the driver holding the reins as if ready for battle. Neighbors watched from doorways, whispering. Inside, Isabella packed a small bundle of clothes, her movements quick, mechanical. Matteo sat on the stool, confused. "Are we going somewhere?" "You are," she said quietly. "You will stay with the Count for a little while." "Why?" "Because he wishes to teach you things I cannot." He frowned. "I don't want to go without you. I will come to visit, every Sunday." Lorenzo entered, gloves in hand. "The carriage is ready." Isabella lifted her chin. "He is not a parcel, my lord." "I know that." She knelt before Matteo and held his face. "Remember what I told you. Be kind. Listen. Pray before you sleep." Tears brimmed in the boy's eyes. "Mama, please. Go now, my heart. Go." Lorenzo watched silently as she kissed her son's forehead, then helped him into the carriage. Matteo turned, looking through the window until the village disappeared from view. When they reached the estate, Lorenzo led the boy through the grand hall lined with portraits. Servants bowed, whispering behind their hands. "This will be your home now," Lorenzo said. Matteo looked around. "It's too big. You will get used to it." "Where's Mama's chair? She sits by the fire when it rains." Lorenzo hesitated. "There are many chairs here. None of them are hers," Matteo said simply. The boy's words struck deeper than any accusation. That night Lorenzo walked the corridors alone, remembering the cottage, the way Isabella had stood between him and the boy like a mother wolf guarding her young. The next morning, he found Matteo in the stables feeding a horse with both hands. "Do you like animals?" Lorenzo asked. "Yes. Mama says they listen better than people. Your mother is a wise woman. She said you were lost." Lorenzo blinked. "Did she?" "She said sometimes people lose their hearts and don't know where to look for them." Lorenzo felt a sharp ache in his chest. "And do you think she is right?" The boy shrugged. "Maybe you should ask her." Later that day, the steward approached him. "My lord, there is talk in the village. People say you have taken the widow's child." "Let them talk," Lorenzo said. "But the bishop may hear of it. Then I will tell him the truth, that I am correcting an injustice." Still that evening, a messenger arrived from Father Giulio bearing a short letter sealed in wax. Lorenzo broke it open. "My lord, Isabella Moretti has not left her home since the boy's departure. The villagers speak harshly of your action. They pity her. I beg you to consider mercy, for she has lived only to protect the child." Lorenzo crumpled the letter. Mercy. He had shown none, and yet something in him longed to see her again. 2 days later, Isabella received her own letter. The seal bore the Ravanelli crest. Her hands shook as she broke it open. "Signora Moretti, the boy is well. He asks for you often. If you wish, you may come to the estate to serve as his governess. It will give him comfort. Your presence will offend no one, for I have spoken to no one of the past. Accept, and all will be easier for the child." She read it again, unable to breathe. A governess in the Ravanelli house, the same house that had once cast her out. That night, Father Giulio visited. "You cannot go, Isabella, it will break you." "He needs me," she said. "If I stay, I will die wondering whether he cries himself to sleep." "Lorenzo seeks control, not reconciliation." "Then I will endure it." For Matteo. Before dawn, she wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and began the walk to the estate. The gates loomed high, but the guards let her pass. A maid led her to a small chamber near the nursery. When Matteo saw her, he ran into her arms, laughing and crying at once. "Mama, I knew you would come." She kissed his hair. "Hush, my darling, we must be proper here." Lorenzo entered then, pausing at the doorway. "You came." "I came for him, not for you." He nodded slowly. "That is enough." Days passed in uneasy peace. Isabella taught Matteo to read by the window overlooking the gardens. Sometimes she caught Lorenzo watching them from the corridor. Other times he joined them, pretending to discuss the boy's progress, but always ending in quiet arguments about the past. One afternoon, as she guided Matteo's hand across a page, Lorenzo said, "You have patience. I remember that. I learned it from loneliness." He looked at her, but she did not meet his eyes. Do you hate me? He asked. I try not to. And succeed. On most days. He gave a faint smile. Then there is hope for me yet. Before she could answer, a knock came. A woman entered, elegant, confident. Lorenzo, there you are. You missed luncheon. Countess Emilia, he said stiffly. Forgive me. The woman's gaze swept over Isabella and lingered. And who might this be? Lorenzo hesitated. My son's governess. Emilia's brows lifted. Ah, so this is the lady everyone whispers about. Isabella rose, curtsying. Countess. Emilia's smile was thin. I see why the boy looks so spirited. Children imitate what they see. Indeed, Isabella said calmly, he will learn grace from those who possess it. The Countess's eyes flashed, but Lorenzo intervened. Enough. Emilia, please see to the guests. I will join you later. When the woman left, Isabella murmured, You invite vipers to your table. She is no viper, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. She will be. The nobility cannot bear secrets unless they own them. That evening, Lorenzo hosted a dinner for visiting nobles. Isabella kept to the nursery, listening to the faint echoes of laughter and crystal. Matteo slept beside her. Downstairs, Countess Emilia's voice carried through the hall. They say the governess resembles a certain lady from your youth. How charming that she returns just as your wife's mourning ends. Lorenzo's reply was sharp. You forget yourself. Do I? Or do I merely remember too well? By morning, whispers had spread through the estate. Servants glanced at Isabella with knowing smirks. One chambermaid, bold from gossip, said, So the governess is more than she seems? Isabella ignored her. But when she entered the drawing room that afternoon, she found Lorenzo waiting with a folded newspaper. They write of you, he said. She froze. What? Someone told a journalist in Como that the widow Moretti was once my mistress, and that I have brought her here to mask my sin. It is everywhere. Her knees weakened. Who would do this? Emilia, he said bitterly. Or someone in her circle. Then send me away. He looked at her, torn. You would have me surrender to their poison. I would have you protect your name, protect Matteo. He turned toward the window, fists tight. And if I do, they will still say worse. If I do not, they will call me weak. You cannot fight them and keep me here, she said. It will destroy everything. He turned back. I will not lose him. I will not lose you again. Lorenzo, I decide this time, he interrupted, voice low and cold. You will remain until I command otherwise. That night, the servants' stares followed her everywhere. She endured them for Matteo's sake, smiling through whispers, hiding her trembling hands as she prepared lessons. But fear grew with each passing hour. By the third day, word reached the bishop. A letter arrived demanding explanation. The steward delivered it with a grave expression. My lord, the church questions your conduct. Lorenzo read the seal, his face hardening. So it begins. Isabella stood nearby, pale. You see, it will not end until I am gone. He looked at her with a mixture of fury and helplessness. Do you think leaving will silence them? It will only confirm their lies. Better their lies than your ruin. He stepped forward. You speak as if I matter less than your pride. I speak as a mother. Her voice broke, but she did not cry. Lorenzo looked at her as if seeing her anew. Not the trembling girl from years ago, but a woman of strength that shamed his power. You would defy me even now, he said. For him, yes? Then you will go, he said suddenly, as though striking himself with the decision. Before sunset, she bowed her head. Thank you. He stared at her, unable to move, his heart pounding like a man condemned. Outside, thunder rumbled over the lake as the servants packed her few belongings. The air smelled of rain and sorrow. When Matteo learned she was leaving, he threw his arms around her waist. No, Mama, don't go. She held him tight. Hush, my love. The Count will care for you now. You must be brave. I don't want his house. I want ours. Listen to me, she whispered. You must obey him. Promise me. Lorenzo watched from the doorway, his face unreadable. As the carriage was prepared, the servants gathered, pretending politeness, while their eyes devoured the scene. Isabella lifted her chin, refusing to let them see her fear. Matteo sobbed in the Count's arms as she stepped toward the gate. The driver opened the door. She placed one foot on the step, then turned to look at Lorenzo one last time. He did not speak. Neither did she. The carriage door closed. The horses moved forward. But before it reached the end of the drive, a shout came from the terrace. One of the maids, breathless, clutching a folded letter, cried out to the Count, "My lord, this arrived from the bishop's office. It bears the seal of Rome." The maid's voice carried across the courtyard, shrill and uncertain. Lorenzo turned sharply, his hand raised to stop the carriage. The horses reared slightly, and Isabella clutched the side of the door to keep her balance. The letter trembled in the maid's grip as she descended the steps. "Give it here," Lorenzo ordered. He broke the seal without a word. His eyes moved quickly over the page, the rain beginning to dot the parchment. "What does it say?" Isabella asked, her voice barely a whisper. He looked up, his face pale. "The bishop requests my presence in Como. He demands explanation for my household arrangement." "Then go," she said. "Tell him I am gone. It will end this way." Lorenzo's gaze flickered between her and the letter. "He mentions an inquiry from the Countess Emilia. She has taken this to Rome itself. She means to ruin you, and by extension, my son." "Then there is no more time to lose," Isabella said quickly. "Let me go. That is what she wants." Lorenzo folded the letter and slipped it inside his coat. "You will not leave this way. It will look like surrender." "I care nothing for appearances." "I do," he said, his voice hardening. "If the church questions my honor, they will question Matteo's birth. They will call him illegitimate before all of Lombardy. Do you understand?" Her eyes widened. "No, they would not." "They would, and they will unless I silence them." He turned to the driver. "Take her back to the house." "No!" Isabella cried, stepping down. "Lorenzo, do not do this. The scandal will pass if I am gone." He seized her wrist, his voice low and fierce. "It will not pass, it will grow. Every whisper will find its way to Matteo's ears. I will not allow that." She stared at him, seeing for the first time the depth of his fear. "You're not doing this for him," she said softly. "You're doing it to save yourself." "Perhaps," he admitted, "but if I fall, he falls with me." The rain began to fall harder. The servants hurried toward the doors, leaving the two of them standing alone in the courtyard. Finally, Isabella said, "Then let me stay as governess as you planned, nothing more." Lorenzo nodded once. "Until I return from Como. After that we will see." When the carriage rolled back through the gates, the servants exchanged uneasy glances. Isabella followed Matteo into the nursery, her heart aching. The boy clung to her arm. "Are you staying, Mama?" "For now," she whispered. "For a little while." He smiled faintly, content with that answer. The next morning Lorenzo left for Como. The household changed at once. Without the Count's presence, the servants grew bolder, their whispers sharper. Countess Emilia's name fluttered through the corridors like a curse. One afternoon the housekeeper, a stern woman named Marta, cornered Isabella near the stairs. "You should have gone when you could," she said in a low voice. "The Count's favor is a fickle shield. I serve his son, not him. The church does not care whom you serve, only what you are." "I am a mother," Isabella said quietly. Marta's eyes softened for a moment. "Then pray that the boy's father remembers that." For 2 days the house remained restless. When letters arrived from Como, they were carried straight to the Count's study. Isabella heard none of it. She kept to the nursery, reading lessons aloud and singing old songs by the window. Matteo's laughter filled the room, but her heart beat with dread. On the third evening, as twilight deepened, a visitor arrived, a tall man in a dark cloak. The servants whispered his name, Monsignor Ricci, emissary from the bishop. Isabella met him in the parlor with the composure of a woman who had already suffered every possible humiliation. "Good evening, Father." He inclined his head. "Signora Moretti, the Count is in Como, but my questions concern you." "Then ask them." He studied her face. "The church has received troubling reports. You live under the same roof as the Count, caring for his son. Some claim you once shared more than affection for that family." Her hands clasped tightly. "What is it you want to know?" "The truth. The truth is that I am the boy's mother," she said quietly, "and that I have lived in fear of that truth destroying him." Ricci's expression changed from suspicion to shock. "You admit this openly." "I have hidden long enough," he exhaled slowly. "You understand the consequences of what you confess? This will reach the bishop's ear by morning. So be it. I have nothing left to hide." Matteo appeared at the doorway, holding a wooden toy. "Mama, who is this man?" Ricci stared at the child, the resemblance unmistakable. Isabella moved between them, her voice firm. "He is a priest, Matteo. Go back to your room." The boy obeyed, though his eyes lingered curiously on the stranger. When he was gone, Ricci said quietly, "I see. You have my pity, Signora, but pity will not protect you, nor do I ask for it." He bowed slightly and left, the echo of his footsteps fading down the corridor. That night, Isabella sat awake until dawn. She knew the priest's words would find their way to Lorenzo before long. She prayed that when they did, he would understand why she had spoken. When he returned the following day, the servants greeted him with stiff formality. He strode through the hall, his expression unreadable, and found Isabella waiting in the study. "You spoke to Ricci," he said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I was done living in shadows." "Do you know what you have done?" "The bishop now believes my household unfit. He threatens to remove Matteo from my care entirely." Her face drained of color. "No, he cannot." "He can, and he will, if we do not act." She gripped the back of a chair. "Then tell them the truth. Tell them we both sought only to protect him." Lorenzo paced the room, his hands tight behind his back. "They will not believe that. They will think I seduced a servant and hid the child to protect my name. And isn't that what you did?" He froze, his eyes flashing. "I loved you. Does that count for nothing?" "It counts for everything," she said, her voice trembling. "But love without courage is only vanity." The silence that followed was long and heavy. At last, Lorenzo said, "There may be one way. If I acknowledge him publicly, the church cannot take him. He will bear my name, my title." Isabella stared at him. "You would do that? Knowing what they'll say about me? I will endure it." She shook her head. "No, they will not forgive you. They will destroy you. I have lived too long caring what they think. This ends now." That evening he summoned his steward and gave his orders. Invitations were sent to every noble family in the province. By the next afternoon, the estate was filled with carriages and whispers. Isabella remained in the nursery with Matteo, dreading what was to come. When the bells struck 5, a servant came to fetch them. "The Count requests your presence in the great hall." Matteo tugged at her sleeve. "What's happening, Mama?" "Stay close to me," she said. The great hall glittered with candles. Dozens of faces turned as they entered, curious, judgmental, hungry for scandal. At the center, Lorenzo stood in formal dress, his posture rigid. He took Matteo's hand and led him forward. The murmurs rose. "What is this? Whose child is that?" Lorenzo raised his voice. "My friends, you all know the Ravanelli name. You know my house stands for honor. It is time you know the truth. This boy, Matteo, is my son." Gasps rippled through the room. Someone muttered, "Impossible." Another laughed softly in disbelief. Lorenzo's voice grew stronger. "He was born of a union that society condemned, but love sanctified. I claim him now, before all of you, as heir to my estate." The crowd erupted into whispers. Countess Emilia rose from her seat, her face pale with fury. "You disgrace yourself, Lorenzo. You disgrace us all." He looked at her calmly. "Then consider yourself free of my company." She turned to Isabella, her voice trembling with rage. "And you? How dare you stand here after shaming us? Do you think a title erases your sin?" Isabella's voice was steady. "No title erases anything, but love redeems what pride destroys." Emilia's eyes blazed. "The bishop will hear of this." "Let him," Lorenzo said. "I have already written to him myself." The room fell silent. He lifted Matteo into his arms and turned toward the guests. "Sure, you may judge me as you please, but my son will not grow in silence or shame. That ends tonight." Then he carried the boy from the hall, leaving behind the stunned assembly. Isabella followed quietly. In the corridor, Matteo clung to his father's neck. "Why were they angry, Papa?" Lorenzo's voice softened. "Because they do not understand what love costs." The next day, the estate was nearly deserted. Many guests had left before dawn, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Only Father Giulio arrived, weary but smiling faintly. "You have caused an earthquake, my son," he said to Lorenzo. "So be it," Lorenzo answered. The priest nodded. "But earthquakes leave ruins." When night fell, Isabella found Lorenzo standing by the lake outside the villa. He was bareheaded, the wind lifting his hair. "You should rest," she said. "I cannot. The bishop's response will come soon. Whatever he writes, we will endure it." He turned to her, eyes shadowed. "Do you still believe we can?" "Yes, because truth no longer frightens us." He reached for her hand, but she pulled it back gently. "Not yet," she whispered. "Not while the world still watches." Before he could answer, a servant came running down the path, breathless. "My lord." Riders approached from Como, 3 men carrying the bishop's seal. "They demand to see you at once." The hoofbeats reached the courtyard before the servants could light all the torches. Isabella stood in the doorway with Matteo at her side, holding his hand tight. The 3 riders dismounted quickly. Their cloaks were wet from the road, their faces grim. One stepped forward and presented a sealed letter to the steward. "The message is for the Count di Ravanelli," the man said, "from His Excellency, the Bishop of Como." Lorenzo took it, his expression unreadable. He broke the seal and read by the torchlight while everyone waited. The night wind rustled through the trees. After a long silence, he folded the paper and looked toward Isabella. "Well?" she asked quietly. "The bishop demands my presence at dawn. He calls for a formal hearing to determine the boy's future." Her voice trembled. "A hearing?" "He questions whether I am fit to raise him or whether he should be placed under church protection." Matteo pressed against her skirts. "What does that mean, Mama?" She bent down and touched his cheek. "Nothing for you to worry about, my darling." Lorenzo's voice hardened. "You will not come to the hearing. They would use your presence against me." "Then who will defend me?" she asked. "I will. I swear it." That night, neither of them slept. Isabella stayed by Matteo's bed, watching him breathe. Lorenzo walked the length of the gallery again and again, stopping now and then to look out at the lake. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, he mounted his horse and rode toward Como. Hours passed with no word. Isabella went through the motions of her duties, teaching Matteo, keeping him near. When the bell in the distant church tower struck noon, a messenger arrived, breathless. "The hearing continues, Signora. The bishop summoned witnesses. Countess Emilia is among them." Isabella's hands turned cold. "She will destroy him," she murmured. The messenger nodded sadly. "She speaks of morality, of scandal, of the boy's illegitimacy. The count stands alone." She sent the man away and closed the door, her mind racing. Every instinct told her to go, to stand beside Lorenzo before it was too late. Father Giulio found her on the steps moments later, cloak in hand. "You cannot go," he said firmly. "I must. If I stay silent, he will lose everything." "Isabella, the church will not welcome you. They will condemn you without hearing. Then let them see me. Let them hear my voice and decide what kind of sin it is to love too deeply." Before he could stop her, she ran down the path to the stables. By mid-afternoon, the cathedral square of Como was crowded. Nobles, clerics, and curious townspeople had gathered to witness the judgment. Lorenzo stood at the front, tall and composed, though his face was pale from exhaustion. The bishop sat high on his chair, his expression grave. "Count di Ravanelli," he said, "you stand accused not of crime, but of moral impropriety. You claim this boy as your heir. Yet his mother remains unmarried, his birth unblessed by the church. Explain yourself." Lorenzo's voice was steady. "The sin, if there was one, was mine. The woman in question acted only from love and fear. She sought to spare the child from shame." Countess Emilia stepped forward, her voice smooth and sharp. "Love, my lord bishop. Is that what we call deceit now? The widow Moretti concealed this child for years, pretending widowhood while living under the count's protection. Is that virtue?" The bishop raised his hand. "Peace, countess, the matter will be judged on truth, not jealousy." Lorenzo turned toward her. "You speak of virtue as if it were a mirror polished by gossip. You know nothing of the courage it took to raise him alone." Emilia's eyes flashed. "And yet, my lord, she will not even appear to defend herself. That silence speaks loudly." At that moment, the heavy doors of the cathedral opened. A murmur ran through the crowd as Isabella entered, cloak drawn tight around her shoulders. Her steps echoed on the stone floor. "She is here," someone whispered. Lorenzo turned, his composure breaking for an instant. "Isabella, what have you done?" She walked past the murmuring crowd and stopped before the bishop. "Forgive my intrusion, Your Excellency. I come only to speak what no one else can." The bishop regarded her with cool curiosity. "You are Isabella Moretti?" "Yes, Your Excellency." "Then speak." She took a breath, her voice clear. 8 years ago I bore a child in secret, not for shame of him, but to protect him. The man you call sinner today once wished to marry me, but his father forbade it. When the child was born, I wrote to him again and again, but no answer came. I believed he had chosen silence. The bishop leaned forward. "And you never sought forgiveness from the church?" "I sought it from God," she replied, "and I found none until I saw the count again." The hall grew still. Emilia's face darkened, but she said nothing. Lorenzo stepped closer. "You were never meant to stand here alone," he said quietly. The bishop sighed. "The church cannot rewrite the past, but perhaps it may mend what remains. The boy must be raised in faith. If you wish to preserve his future, there is one path open to you both." "What path?" Lorenzo asked. "Marriage. Sanctify what began in sin. Make the boy legitimate before God and man." The words struck the hall like thunder. Emilia gasped. "You cannot be serious. This would make her Countess Ravanelli." The bishop raised a hand. "Be silent, Countess. The church decides, not society." Lorenzo turned to Isabella. "You hear him?" She hesitated. "You would marry me now after all that has happened?" He met her gaze. "I would marry you because I should have done it long ago." Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not answer. The bishop nodded once. "Then I will give you until morning to decide. The child's fate will rest on your answer." When they left the cathedral, the sun was sinking behind the mountains. They walked in silence through the square, the murmurs of the crowd following them. At the carriage, Isabella stopped. "Lorenzo, this cannot be the way." "It is the only way," he said. "If we marry, they can no longer take him from us." She looked at him sadly. "But they will say you married in guilt." "Let them. I will know the truth." That night, back at the estate, Matteo ran to meet them. "Did they say I can stay?" he asked eagerly. "Soon," Lorenzo said, ruffling his hair. "Soon, my boy." When Matteo had gone to bed, Isabella stood by the fire, staring into the flames. Lorenzo watched her. "You do not trust me," he said quietly. "I trust you more than I should," she replied. "But marriage cannot be born from fear." "It is not fear," he said. "It is reparation." She shook her head. "I do not want to be your penance." "You were never that. You are what remains of everything I lost." He stepped closer, his voice low. "When I saw you walk into that cathedral, I knew I could not stand against you. You were braver than I have ever been." She looked up at him, tears glistening. "Do you truly want this life, Lorenzo, not for duty, but for us?" "Yes, for us." She turned away, her voice barely audible. "Then give me until morning." He nodded, knowing no argument would move her heart before its time. The night stretched long and sleepless again. Isabella sat at Matteo's bedside, brushing his hair from his forehead as he dreamed. She whispered, "If I do this, my son, it will be for you, for your peace." At dawn, church bells rang faintly across the water. Lorenzo waited in the chapel, his hands clasped. When the doors opened, Isabella entered slowly, her face pale but calm. "Have you decided?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I will marry you, but not for the church's command nor for their forgiveness. I will marry you because love must end where it began, in truth." He exhaled, relief flooding his features. "Then we will be free." Father Giulio stepped forward to prepare the ceremony, but before the vows could begin, the steward burst through the door. "My lord!" Lorenzo turned sharply. "What is it?" The man's face was ashen. "A messenger from the cathedral. He brings a decree from the bishop. The hearing's decision has changed. It concerns the boy." Lorenzo took a step forward, his voice hoarse. "Changed? How?" The steward swallowed hard. "The bishop has withdrawn his blessing. He forbids the union until further investigation. He orders the boy taken to the convent school in Milan until the matter is settled." Isabella gasped. "No, he cannot take him." The steward bowed his head. "The bishop's men are already on the road." Lorenzo's hand tightened around hers. "Then we will go to him before they arrive. We will not let them take our son." He turned toward the courtyard, shouting for the horses. The first drops of rain began to fall as the sound of approaching riders echoed faintly beyond the gates. Rain poured as if heaven itself were breaking open. The horses galloped through the misty road that wound along the lake. Isabella clung to the carriage seat, while Lorenzo urged the driver forward. His voice rose above the thunder. "They cannot take him, do you hear? Not while I breathe." She held his arm. "Lorenzo, please, if we reach them too late—" "We won't." The wheels hit stones and splashed through puddles. The rain drenched them both, but neither cared. Far ahead, two riders in the bishop's livery could be seen on the road, leading a smaller carriage between them. Isabella recognized the white horse Matteo had loved to watch from the stable. "There!" she cried. "They have him!" Lorenzo signaled the driver to halt. He leapt down and ran through the rain, shouting to the riders, "Stop in the name of Count Ravanelli!" The men turned, startled. "My lord, by order of the bishop, the boy must be taken to Milan." "You'll take no one," Lorenzo said, his voice low and commanding. "He is my son, and I forbid it." The soldiers hesitated. Isabella reached the smaller carriage and pulled open the door. Matteo looked up, his eyes wide with fear. "Mama!" She gathered him into her arms, trembling. "You're safe, my love, you're safe now." Lorenzo stepped forward. "Tell your bishop this, the child remains where he belongs. If he wishes to question me, let him come himself." The riders exchanged glances. "We cannot defy an order." "Then you defy a father," Lorenzo said, his hand resting on the hilt of his riding crop. "Go back. Tell him the truth is already spoken." One of the men dismounted, uncertain. "He will excommunicate you. Then I will build my own chapel by this lake," Lorenzo said quietly. "Now ride." The riders mounted again, their faces pale, and turned their horses back toward Como. When they vanished into the rain, Isabella clutched Matteo closer. "You risked everything," she whispered. "I risked nothing that mattered," Lorenzo said, looking at her with something between sorrow and relief. "Now, it's done." The storm slowly broke as they returned to the estate. The rain eased into a soft drizzle, and by the time they reached the gates, the clouds had begun to part. Father Giulio waited there, his robe soaked, his lantern flickering. "You have defied the bishop," he said quietly. "I have defended my son," Lorenzo replied. The priest sighed. "He will not forgive this." "Then let him keep his forgiveness," Lorenzo said. "We have found our own." That night, they brought Matteo inside, warming him by the fire. Isabella changed his wet clothes while he spoke, his voice bright again. "I wasn't afraid, Mama. I knew you'd come." She smiled through tears. "My brave boy." When he fell asleep, she turned to find Lorenzo standing by the window, watching the rain drift away from the glass. "You should rest," she said softly. "I cannot. I keep thinking of what almost was. How easily they could have taken him. How close I came to losing everything." "You didn't lose him." He looked at her. "No. Because of you." For a long moment they said nothing. The fire crackled. The lake wind sighed beyond the shutters. Then he crossed the room and stopped before her. "I have spent years chasing honor," he said. "But tonight, for the first time, I know what it means to be a man. Not a count, not a son. Just a man who loves a woman who saved his soul." She tried to answer, but words failed. He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. His voice lowered. "You once said love without courage is vanity. Tonight I choose courage." Her breath caught. "And if the world turns against us? Then let it. I have turned toward you." He drew her closer, their foreheads almost touching. "Isabella, marry me. Not because the church commands it, not because society demands it, but because we have earned this love." She trembled. "If we marry, they will still talk. Let them talk until they grow tired. We will be living while they whisper." Her tears fell silently. "Yes, Lorenzo, yes." He kissed her hands, one after the other, as if sealing a vow. Then, with quiet joy, he said, "Tomorrow, the bells of Belano will ring for us, not by decree, but by our will." The next morning, sunlight returned over Lake Como. The storm had cleared, washing the world clean. Villagers gathered near the small church by the water, curious and hesitant. Father Giulio stood by the door, his eyes gentle. When Isabella arrived with Matteo, the crowd parted. Lorenzo came from the opposite path, dressed not in his noble attire but in a simple dark coat. He looked like any other man who came to seek blessing. Father Giulio lifted his hand. "Are you ready?" Lorenzo took Isabella's hand. "We have been ready for 8 years." Inside the chapel, the ceremony was small, quiet, almost secret. The priest's voice rose softly. "In the sight of God, you are no longer two but one. What has been broken is restored." When the vows were spoken, Matteo slipped his hand into theirs, his smile lighting the space brighter than the sun through the stained glass. The priest looked at the child and said, "And you, young master, shall grow in a home of truth." Afterward, the villagers waited outside. Some bowed their heads, others murmured blessings. Even those who once gossiped now smiled shyly. Countess Emilia was nowhere to be seen. Her carriage had left Como the previous night, her pride unable to bear defeat. When they stepped out into the open, the bells began to ring, first hesitantly, then in full chorus. Isabella looked up, astonished. "You asked for this?" Lorenzo smiled. "No. The bell ringer heard of our vows. He said joy deserves sound." She laughed softly. "Then let it echo forever." They walked to the lake shore where everything had once begun. The water glimmered beneath the morning sun. Lorenzo turned to her, his voice tender. "Do you remember the promise I made here long ago? That you would return," she said. "And I have, but not as the man I was. You gave me back what I lost." She looked at him, eyes shining. "And you gave my son his name. Our son," he corrected gently. They stood in silence, the sound of bells fading across the water. Matteo ran ahead, chasing a white bird that rose from the reeds. Isabella watched him, her heart full. Lorenzo spoke quietly. "When I see him, I see you. The same fire, the same mercy. I used to think nobility was something inherited. Now I know it's something taught." She turned to him. "He will learn from you." "From us," he said. The sun warmed the stones beneath their feet. Isabella took his hand. "Do you ever think of what would have happened if your father had allowed us to marry back then?" "Yes," he said, "and I thank God he didn't, because then I would never have learned to fight for what truly matters." She smiled. "Perhaps suffering was our teacher." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "And love was our graduation." They laughed quietly together, the sound mixing with the gentle lapping of the water. Behind them, the village went about its day, children calling, merchants shouting, bells still tolling in bursts of joy. Later, they sat beneath the olive trees near the old path where they had once met. Lorenzo spread his coat on the grass and gestured for her to sit beside him. "Do you remember this place?" he asked. "How could I forget? This is where you promised forever. And this time I mean to keep it." He reached into his coat pocket and drew out the silver cross she had kept all those years, the same one she once held as she prayed for peace. "I thought it was lost," she whispered. "I found it in your drawer the night I came to take the boy. I kept it with me ever since. Now I return it to you, not as a memory, but as a symbol of what we became." She took it, her hands trembling. "Then let it stay with us always." Matteo ran toward them carrying wildflowers. "Mama, Papa, look what I found." Lorenzo laughed, lifting him high. "For your mother, the most beautiful bouquet in all of Lombardy." The boy placed the flowers in Isabella's lap and said proudly, "We're a family now." "Yes, my darling," she whispered. "Forever." The afternoon stretched in golden quiet. They watched Matteo skip stones across the lake. Each ripple spread wide, touching the farthest edges of the water. Isabella leaned against Lorenzo's shoulder. "Do you think they will forgive us someday?" He smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but forgiveness isn't what we needed. Only truth and love," she added. "And love." He kissed her forehead, his hand resting on hers. "This is where we begin again. No more secrets, no more fear, only peace," she said softly. They sat there until the sun sank low and the air grew cool. The first evening star appeared above the mountains, shining pale and steady. Matteo ran back to them, breathless. "It's getting dark. Shall we go home?" Lorenzo stood and lifted him into his arms. "Yes, home." As they walked back toward the cottage by the lake, the same that once sheltered their sorrow, now filled with laughter, Isabella looked back one last time. The water reflected the fading light, calm and endless. "Lorenzo," she said. He turned. "Yes?" Do you think love changes with time? He smiled. No, it only deepens. Like this lake, still, quiet, but deeper than anyone can see. She slipped her arm through his. Then let it hold us. They walked on, their steps unhurried, their shadows long in the dusk. The church bells rang again, faint and distant, carrying over the water like a promise kept. Inside the cottage, the fire waited, the same hearth where she had once prayed through sleepless nights. Matteo ran ahead to light the lamp. Lorenzo closed the door behind them, shutting out the chill of evening. Home, he said again, his voice full of wonder. Isabella smiled, the silver cross glinting at her throat. Home, she echoed, and reached for his hand as the wind outside stilled and the house filled with quiet light. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you like the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.